Hello, friends, and welcome to the second part of Real Scary Stories for Halloween. But before we start, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment to help my channel. First story, my parents disappear every October 31st. Every October 31st, my parents didn't just leave for a night out, they would completely vanish. By the time the sun set, they were nowhere to be found, leaving me alone in the house. I would search, call out for them, but it was always the same, no sign of them. Strangely, we never discussed it. The following morning, they would return as if nothing unusual had happened, behaving like it was just a typical night. But I knew it wasn't. It couldn't be. I had learned that lesson too well. This all started when I was 6. I still remember my first Halloween experience vividly. I had on a witch costume and was eager to go trick-or-treating. But just as night fell, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Something felt off. It was quieter than usual, unnervingly so. I ran around calling for my parents, but no one responded. As fear took over, I realized I was truly alone. The front door was locked, windows secured, there was no way out. That's when I found the first note. It sat on the kitchen table, written in my mother's familiar handwriting. It read, Rule 1, stay in your room. Do not leave until sunrise. Ignore whatever you hear. I didn't understand it at the time. I was just a frightened kid. I didn't want to stay in my room. I wanted to find my parents. But there was something about the note that made me follow its instructions. Armed with a flashlight and a pillow, I locked myself in my bedroom, hiding under the covers. I thought maybe it was some odd prank or game. That night, I barely slept. The house creaked more than usual, and there were unfamiliar sounds. Scratching at my door, footsteps in the hallway, whispers I couldn't make sense of. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or my imagination, but deep down, I knew better. There was something else in the house. The next morning, I cautiously opened my door to find my parents back, casually sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. When I asked where they had been, they just smiled and told me I must have had a nightmare. That was just the beginning. Every Halloween, the same thing happened. My parents would disappear just before dark, leaving behind a note. Each year, the instructions became a little more specific, a little more unnerving. By the time I was 8, the notes included things like, avoid looking out the windows. Don't respond if you hear someone calling your name. And the noises, they became more intense. One year when I was 9, the sounds outside my door were unbearable. There was loud, insistent knocking, not gentle taps, but pounding. I covered my ears, shutting my eyes tightly, trying to block it out. But then I heard my mother's voice on the other side, calling my name. Ellie, it's fine. You can come out now, she said, her tone calm, reassuring. For a brief moment, I almost believed it was really her. But I knew the rule. Do not open the door, no matter what you hear. I obeyed. I stayed huddled under my blankets until the noise eventually faded. I never told my parents about the voice, and they never asked. As the years went by, it became a twisted Halloween ritual. While other kids collected candy and enjoyed the festivities, I stayed locked in my room, listening to the house come alive with strange, unseen things. I grew accustomed to the notes, the eerie noises, and the feeling of being watched. It was all part of my own haunted holiday routine. But when I turned 13, everything shifted. That year, the note was different. Instead of the usual instructions, it read, Rule 4, there's something new in the house tonight. I didn't know what it meant, but I immediately felt a cold dread creep over me. Something new? I locked my door as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. The noises began earlier than usual. At first, it was the familiar creaks and footsteps, but then I heard something else, breathing. It was slow, heavy, and came from just outside my door. It wasn't human. I clutched my flashlight tightly, knowing it was useless but holding on for comfort. Then came the scratching. Not at the door this time, but from within my room. I swung the flashlight around, searching the walls and ceiling, but there was nothing there. The scratching grew louder, and it felt like it was coming from under my bed. I was too terrified to look. Suddenly, the scratching stopped, replaced by a soft, unsettling giggle, a childlike sound that chilled me to the core. I knew it wasn't me, nor was it my parents. There was something else in the room. I pressed myself against the wall, holding the flashlight out like a weapon. The giggle continued, soft and mocking. I whispered, it's just a game. It's not real. But I no longer believed that. Then there was a loud bang on the door. The entire room trembled. The breathing returned, now right outside my door. Bang! The door shook again. Bang! The handle twisted, and I could hear the lock rattling. Whatever was outside wanted to get in. I tried to hold on to the flashlight, but my hands were trembling too much. The banging became more intense, and I was sure the door would break open. But just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence filled the room. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Then I heard my mother's voice again, sweet and gentle. Ellie, it's okay. You can come out now. I knew better this time. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I stayed hidden, praying for the night to end. Then I heard the soft click of the lock turning. The door slowly opened, just a crack, and I saw a shadow in the hallway. Something tall, its limbs unnaturally long, its fingers clawed. It wasn't my mother. The figure stood there, watching me. I could feel its gaze, though I couldn't see its face. My heart raced, and I feared I might pass out. But then, the first rays of sunlight filtered into the room. The creature recoiled, hissing, and within seconds it disappeared. The door slammed shut, and everything fell eerily quiet. I didn't leave my room until the sun was fully up. When I finally did, the house was as it had been the night before, empty and silent. My parents were back, acting as if nothing had happened. I told them everything, but they just exchanged glances and chuckled softly. "It was just a bad dream," my dad said. "You're safe now." My mom smiled and added, "It's over," but I knew better. What I had experienced wasn't a dream, it was real, and my parents' refusal to acknowledge it was the most terrifying part. Now that I have children of my own, I understand the truth. Whatever haunted me back then, whatever played that twisted game, it's still out there, and it's hungry. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my children from it. We don't celebrate Halloween. I won't let them go through what I did, because I know deep down the game isn't over. It's just waiting to start again. Second story. I work at a motel. I think skinwalkers are staying here. If you're ever driving down Route 106 in Michigan and spot a sign for the Greenbrier Motel, my advice is simple. Keep going. There's something very wrong about that place, and the last thing I want is for anyone else to end up dead. I started working at the Greenbrier a week ago. It wasn't what you'd call a dream job. Night shifts at the front desk, checking people in and out, and doing some inventory in the back. The quiet, though, suited me just fine. The motel, tucked away on an isolated stretch of highway, left me with plenty of downtime to read or play games on my phone. Plus, Frank, the owner, didn't care that I was a high school dropout with a criminal record. But from day one, I knew something wasn't right. First, there was the smell. When the wind blew just right, the entire parking lot reeked of something rotten, like decaying meat. I would rush to shut the windows, but the stench still made its way in through the air ducts. The motel is surrounded by thick woods, so I thought maybe it was some animal carcass nearby. Or it could have been roadkill scattered along the highway. Either way, it was disturbing. Not a great start to the job. The rooms, too, were odd. Some of them had no windows at all, and it seemed intentional. You could see the outline where the windows had once been before they were sealed up. When I asked Frank about it, he told me that some guests preferred it that way. Apparently, rooms without windows were in high demand. I didn't push for more details. Something about his tone made me back off. Things went from strange to downright eerie the moment Frank left for the night. As I was settling in at the desk, a woman walked in. She was probably in her 40s, with jet black hair and unnaturally pale skin. The second she stepped inside, she locked the door behind her. "Frank's gone, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, a bit wary. And who are you?" She introduced herself as Matilda, said she'd been working at the motel for a decade, cleaning up after the guests checked out. After a few minutes of small talk, she leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to make sure you stay safe here," she said, casting a nervous glance toward the door. "So listen to me, okay?" My stomach tightened. Okay? Whatever you do, don't ask questions. Just check people in, check them out, and keep to yourself. Then you'll be fine." I felt a wave of unease wash over me. So it was that kind of motel. Probably a front for illegal activities, I figured, all going on under our grimy roof. What if the cops show up? Am I going to get arrested too? She gave me a blank look. The police? Yeah, like if they find something illegal in one of the rooms. I already have a record. I can't afford... She cut me off with a shake of her head. "You won't have to worry about the police. Just do what I said, and don't look at their faces for too long." A chill crept up my spine. They didn't want witnesses. Didn't want me to be able to identify them, I realized. "Okay, got it. No questions, no long looks." She smiled, and for a brief second, I felt relieved. "You'll be just fine." But it turned out I had plenty to worry about. That night, 3 people checked in, each one more bizarre than the last. First, there was this big, burly guy wearing sunglasses like something straight out of The Godfather. Then a woman, dolled up in layers of makeup that looked thick enough to crack. And finally, a skinny guy in a hoodie that reeked of some strange chemical. But I did what Matilda said. I didn't ask questions. Not even when Hoodie Guy handed over a fake ID so obvious it practically screamed, "Arrest me." I just kept repeating the mantra in my head. Don't ask questions and you'll be fine. I never even glanced up from the computer. Midnight came and I figured the rest of the shift would be uneventful. On this lonely road, it was rare for people to check in late. I put on some music, fired up Minesweeper, and settled in for a quiet night. But at 2 a.m., the door swung open. I looked up and saw the sunglasses guy again, the one from earlier, who looked like a mobster. Oh no, I forgot to lock the door. I kept my eyes fixed on the screen as he approached. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to act casual. "Do you have any razors for sale?" Razors? At 2 a.m.? My mind raced, imagining him slicing someone up in one of the rooms. No, we don't sell razors," I replied, still glued to the computer. "Can you check in the back, please?" My pulse quickened. The last thing I wanted was to turn my back on him. He could pull out a weapon, jump me, do God knows what. But refusing him might be worse. It could make him mad. I stared at the screen, weighing my options. But in the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. His sunglasses sat too low on his face, like his eyes weren't where they should be. No eyebrows, no contours of a brow ridge, just smooth, flat skin above the glasses, like he had no eye sockets at all. "Could you check in the back?" His tone was sharper now, edging toward anger. Yeah, sure." I jumped up and hurried into the storage room. I glanced back quickly. He wasn't following me, thankfully. I thought about hiding out in there until he left, but then his voice came again, louder this time. "Did you find them?" I spotted some razors near the extra toothbrushes and soap, grabbed a pack, and handed it over without looking him in the face. "Thanks," he said, his tone softer now. He turned and left. As soon as he was out the door, I locked it, shut the blinds, and sat back at the desk, heart pounding. All I could think about was the strange way his face looked. And then it hit me. All three guests, the mobster, the makeup woman, and the hoodie guy, had something covering their faces. The woman had so much makeup on, it was practically cracking around her eyes and lips. And hoodie guy, he had his hood pulled so tight, you couldn't see his ears or hair. It was as if they were all hiding something. By the time morning rolled around, I couldn't wait to leave. As soon as the day shift workers arrived, I bolted out of there and headed straight home. My sleep was filled with nightmares of faceless figures and spidery eyelashes. Then came night number 2. This time, the shift was quieter. No one checked in after I arrived. The vacancy sign was still lit, but it seemed like the guests had all shown up earlier. I locked the door, grabbed some coffee, and spent the rest of the night with my book, thankful for the calm. The quiet didn't last as long as I'd hoped. Close to midnight, a loud noise echoed from outside. I dropped my book and rushed to the window. Room 16's door was wide open. I glanced around. No one seemed to be outside. The parking lot and sidewalk were empty, and the room itself was dark, with no lights on. Curious, I checked the computer. To my surprise, room 16 hadn't been booked. Should I go out there and close it? I hesitated. It was late, and the place was deserted, save for the occasional car passing by. If someone had broken into that room and attacked me, there would be no one to hear my screams. So instead, I locked the door and pulled up the security cameras. Rewinding the footage, I saw a woman exit the room. Her face was obscured by long dark hair. She walked into room 22. I checked the computer again. Room 22 was reserved by someone named Cassandra Johnson. A sigh escaped me. It seemed like Cassandra had gone into room 16, likely to swipe something. Maybe Matilda had forgotten to lock up the room after cleaning it. I sighed again, grabbed the keys, and headed to close the door. I thought about knocking on Cassandra's door, but decided against it. Better to stay out of other people's business. My plan was simple: lock room 16 and get back to the front desk. As I approached the open room, an awful stench hit me. Something rotten, decomposing. My stomach churned. What on earth had Cassandra done? Thrown up in there? Stuffed the room with garbage? Reluctantly, I reached inside the dark room and switched on the light. Everything looked normal. The bed was made, the carpet spotless, but the smell was even stronger now. I held my breath as I scanned the room, nausea beginning to set in. Then I saw it. Something lay on the carpet, partially hidden by the bed. What is that? It was beige, folded over on itself like a crumpled sheet, but our linens were white. Heart pounding, I stepped closer. "Hello," I called out, hoping for no response. Nothing. The closer I got, the stronger the smell. I fought the urge to throw up, pressing my nose closed. I peeked over the bed and froze. A pile of beige, translucent material was folded over itself, but I instantly recognized certain familiar shapes, like fingers, 5 of them, resembling a glove made of skin, poking out from one of the folds. It looked like someone had shed their skin. I stumbled back, my legs shaky. No way, this can't be happening. I backed toward the door, my throat dry. There was no blood, no sign of a violent crime. It was more like the clean, perfect shedding of a snake's skin, eerily holding the shape of whoever it had belonged to. I bolted from the room. And there she was, the woman from room 22 walking toward me. Her dark straight hair hung over her face, and even through it, I could see something was wrong. Her eyes and lips were misplaced, just slightly off. She moved quickly, her shoes tapping the pavement. I didn't stick around to find out what she wanted. I sprinted back to the lobby, hearing her footsteps close behind me. I barely made it inside, locking the door behind me before collapsing in the back room, hidden from her view. Then the whistling began. It came from outside, circling the building. First at the front door, then the back, then the windows. It drifted in the night air, like someone was searching for a way inside. The haunting melody persisted for an hour. Eventually the whistling faded, but I stayed put until dawn broke, paralyzed with fear. As soon as the morning shift arrived, I bolted out of there. I wanted to quit. After everything I'd seen, I didn't want to come back, but I needed the job. Finding work with a record wasn't easy, and it was either this or face eviction, so I returned. When I got to my shift, I pulled Matilda aside and told her everything. I asked her repeatedly if my life was in danger, if anyone else was at risk. "All you have to do is mind your own business, and you'll be fine," she said. So that's exactly what I did. For days, nothing of note happened. A few guests wore hats or sunglasses or too much makeup, but I avoided eye contact and minded my own business. Then came November 14th. The rain was pouring down in sheets that night. Thunder occasionally shook the windows. With so few cars on the highway, I wasn't expecting anyone to stop by. But there was a knock at the window. A man was standing there. Chills ran down my spine. He was wearing a hoodie that hid most of his face, and he knocked aggressively, like he was in a hurry. I grabbed the mace from under the counter, just in case. "Do you have any rooms available?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. The vacancy sign behind him glowed brightly. There was no way he hadn't seen it. "Yeah, come on in," I said, unlocking the door with one hand, keeping the mace in my pocket with the other. He stepped inside, rain dripping off his jacket. I barely glanced at him as I walked back behind the counter, my eyes fixed on the computer screen. I could feel him leaning over the counter, only a foot or two away from me. His clothes smelled stale, like mothballs, and water dripped onto the counter from his sleeve. "Can you go faster?" he rasped. "Sorry, sir. This computer's old. I'm going as fast as I can." My fingers fumbled on the mouse. "I don't have all day," he growled, moving even closer. I was tempted to look up, but I forced my eyes to stay on the screen. Whatever was going on, I wasn't going to get involved. No way was I going to witness whatever was happening here. "Your name?" I asked, breaking the tense silence. There was a pause, then he answered. "Daniel Jones," a common name. Fake, most likely, but I didn't care. I typed it in, finished the booking, and handed him the key to room 7. He didn't leave. He just stood there, lingering by the door. "Need anything else?" I asked, avoiding eye contact. "Can you walk me to my room?" Hell no, but he was staring at me, his blue eyes unsettling. There was something off about him, and I knew if I refused, it might escalate. "Okay," I said, my hand gripping the mace tighter. We stepped out into the rain. He led the way, and I followed at a distance, watching as he fiddled with the key at room 7. "You have a lot of guests?" he asked, still stalling. "A few," I said. Then I realized he wasn't trying to open the door. He was just buying time. That's when I heard it, whistling, that same eerie tune from the woman a few nights ago. "I'm sorry," he muttered, "but I needed bait." My mind raced as the woman appeared in the parking lot, her smile unnaturally wide, her eyes pale and empty. I ran for the lobby. I could hear footsteps splashing in the rain behind me, getting closer. I barely made it inside, slamming the door behind me. She was standing there, watching, smiling, and then she changed. The man from room 7 lunged at her, but in a twisted, unnatural motion, she killed him. I was left to watch in horror as she calmly returned to room 22, as if nothing had happened. The police came soon after, but nothing I said seemed to matter. They left with grim faces, warning me not to speak of what I'd seen, but I can't stay silent anymore. If you're ever driving through Michigan and see a vacancy at the Greenbrier Motel, keep driving. Third story, we went trick-or-treating at a town that shouldn't exist. Halloween had always been the most exciting night of the year for Peter and me. We were best friends, practically joined at the hip since kindergarten. We'd spend weeks planning, charting out every house in our neighborhood to maximize our candy haul. At school, we'd talk about our strategy while teachers would smile at us and say, "Don't eat too much candy tonight." But Peter and I had one mission, to get as much candy as humanly possible. We weren't just after the usual treats, though. We had our sights set on the premium stuff, the full-sized candy bars, the ones you'd have to beg your parents to buy. And as we got older, we started hearing whispers from the other kids. The kids at school claimed that in Rosewood Heights, the next town over, people were rich. They hand out the big ones, one kid told us in a hushed tone. Full-size Snickers, Reese's, and sometimes even king-size bars. Peter and I locked eyes, knowing exactly what we had to do. But there was one hitch, our parents. Every year they warned us to stay away from Rosewood Heights. "It's dangerous," my mom would say. "Stay in our neighborhood." She never gave a reason, just shook her head and said, "It's not safe." Peter wasn't buying it. "They just don't want us to outdo the other kids with better candy," he said. And honestly, I kind of agreed. I mean, how dangerous could a neighborhood be? It was just another place where people lived, and the only thing that set it apart was the wealth. That year we decided we were going to Rosewood Heights. We'd hit every house, collect a mountain of candy, and be back before anyone noticed. When Halloween night finally arrived, we were buzzing with excitement. The cool night air, the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, it was perfect. We raced through our neighborhood, filling our pillowcases with candy. But no matter how much we got, Peter kept saying, "It's nothing compared to what we'll get at Rosewood Heights." By the time most of the other kids were heading home, Peter and I found ourselves standing on the edge of town, looking over at Rosewood Heights. The houses were massive, each one perfectly maintained with manicured lawns and glowing pumpkins on every doorstep. "Let's go," Peter urged, his eyes bright with excitement. "We'll be back before anyone notices." Crossing into Rosewood Heights felt like stepping into another world. The houses were pristine, straight out of a magazine, and each door we knocked on opened to someone handing us exactly what we wanted. Full-size candy bars, Snickers, Reese's, Twix. Our pillowcases got heavier with each stop, but there was something off about the people giving us candy. At first I brushed it off. People are supposed to smile on Halloween, right? But in Rosewood Heights, their smiles were too wide, too fake. Their eyes seemed hollow, like they were wearing masks. Not the fun kind, but something darker. It made me uneasy, but Peter just laughed it off. "They're rich," he said. Like that explained everything. I tried to shake off the weird feeling. We were racking up the best candy stash of our lives, after all. But when we got to the last house, something felt different. The house was larger than the others, with dark windows and a yard covered in creepy clown decorations. Those exaggerated grinning faces with sharp teeth. I hated clowns, but Peter thought they were hilarious. "Come on, one last stop," Peter said, pulling me toward the door. I hesitated, peering through the window. Inside, I saw a family sitting around the kitchen table. A father, mother, teenage girl, and a boy our age. But they weren't moving or talking. They just sat there, staring blankly, like mannequins. "Peter, Don't chicken out now," Peter said, and before I could stop him, he rang the doorbell. The sound of the doorbell echoed unnaturally, like it had been distorted. The family inside didn't move at first, but then, all at once, they turned their heads, their eyes locking onto us through the window. My blood ran cold. Their faces were too pale, with dark shadows under their eyes. They looked sick, but their expressions didn't change. Suddenly, they shot up from their chairs, not like they stood up, but like they were pulled by invisible strings, rushing toward the door. "Run!" I yelled, but Peter didn't move. The door flew open, and they grabbed him, pulling him inside with inhuman strength. Peter barely had time to scream before the door slammed shut. I could still hear him shouting, but his voice was muffled, like the house was swallowing him. Without thinking, I dropped my candy and ran, my heart pounding. Footsteps thundered behind me, fast and heavy. As I fled, every house on the block lit up, one after the other, like dominoes falling. And then the doors opened, and the people, the same ones who'd given us candy minutes before, stepped out, no longer smiling, their faces twisted into grotesque grins, their eyes gleaming like the clowns in the yard. They were chasing me. I ran faster than I ever had, zigzagging through yards, over fences. Their footsteps were getting closer, but I didn't stop. My lungs were burning, my legs on fire, but I couldn't let them catch me. I was nearly caught once. Someone's hand grazed my arm, but I managed to slip away. I didn't stop running until I was back in my neighborhood, the familiar streetlights flickering as I sprinted home. I didn't look back. When I burst through the front door, my mom was waiting, her face pale with worry. "Where's Peter?" she asked, but I couldn't answer. I ran to my room, crawled under the covers, and lay there shaking. I didn't sleep. All I could hear were Peter's screams, and all I could see were the faces of that family in the house. The next morning, Peter's parents came to our door. His mom asked if I'd seen him. He hadn't come home. I wanted to tell them what happened, but I was too scared. I couldn't get the words out. The police were called. They searched for Peter, but they didn't believe my story. To them, I was just a kid with a wild imagination. They searched for weeks, but nothing turned up. Eventually, they stopped looking. That was 28 years ago. For a while, Peter's face was everywhere, on the news, on missing posters. But over time, people moved on. They stopped talking about him. And Rosewood Heights, it seemed to disappear. Every time I tried to find it, the streets were different. The houses were gone. It was like it had never existed. But I remember, Halloween is here again, and after all these years, I know what I have to do. I'm going back to Rosewood Heights. I don't care if it's a nightmare or if it's real, I have to find Peter. Wish me luck. And thanks to everyone for watching. To those who are going to bed, good night, don't forget to like, and happy Halloween to everyone.